My name's Dan. At least, that's the name I still answer to. On the rare occasion, I interact with anyone. I worked for the DEA for 17 years. 8 of those were spent undercover, deep cover, the kind where you forget what your real voice sounds like. Department psychologists say, no agent should do more than 5 years undercover. That's the magic number before the personality fractures start showing up, before the paranoia becomes permanent, before you stop pretending to be someone else and realize you've become him. But when a case is producing seizures, arrests, intelligence, headlines, the paperwork gets flexible. Supervisors stop asking questions they don't want answers to. The machine keeps rolling because everyone wants to be the guy who finally lands a meaningful blow in the so-called war on drugs. And since the 1990s, the global drug trade has mostly belonged to the Mexican cartels. Different names, different flags, same business model. Ruthless corporations with armies attached. Being America's next-door neighbor meant the DEA might as well have relocated its headquarters from Washington, D.C. to Mexico City. Hell, it would have saved a fortune in fuel costs alone. People think undercover work is like television. Fake mustaches and microphones taped under jackets. It isn't. Police undercover operations are restricted by jurisdiction. Local cops stay local. Even the FBI operates under American law and the Constitution. The DEA, we operated internationally. That meant doors opened for us that stayed locked for everybody else. I won't get into specifics, but let's just say command had a practical understanding of morality. If throwing a punch strengthened your cover, nobody cared. If you had to ride along on a robbery to avoid suspicion, reports could become vague. Officially, none of it happened. Unofficially, everybody knew the rules. There were limits, obviously. If agents started stacking bodies or spraying Mexican police checkpoints with machine guns, Washington would suddenly rediscover ethics and shut everything down. But short of that, results mattered more than purity. And I was good at it. My father was Mexican. I looked the part naturally. Dark hair, olive skin, the accent came easy. Spanish wasn't learned for me. It was inherited. I could switch between American and Northern Mexican dialects without thinking. Most importantly, I knew how to listen. Cartel guys are paranoid by nature. They can smell fake masculinity, fake confidence, fake desperation. You had to become believable. I started small, courier jobs, protection work, running shipments north through Sonora. Over time, I climbed. Not fast enough to attract suspicion, but steady enough to matter. By year 4, I was handling logistics. By year 5, I was trusted with money. That's when things started going wrong. There's a dangerous phase in undercover work where fear disappears. At first, you're terrified every second. Every glance feels like exposure. Every silence feels loaded. Then, eventually, you survive enough close calls that you start believing you're untouchable. I got cocky, careless. One night in Monterey, one of the guys in our crew, Miguel, former military, eyes like a starving wolf, found something he shouldn't have. It wasn't a badge or a wire. I was smarter than that. It was inconsistencies, dates that didn't line up, a name I used once while drunk that connected somewhere it shouldn't have. Tiny things. But in that world, tiny things kill you. He didn't confront me immediately. That was the worst part. I saw the suspicion growing behind his eyes over the next week. He watched me too carefully, asked questions twice. started showing up unexpectedly. I knew what was coming, and when the cartel decides to lay you off, it's not a handshake and a cardboard box. If you're lucky, it's a bullet in the head. If you're unlucky, well, I've heard recordings. I had maybe 48 hours before Miguel brought his suspicions to leadership. Maybe less. Running wasn't possible. Extraction would have burned years of work and destroyed ongoing operations across 3 states. The agency wouldn't approve it unless exposure was confirmed, and by then I'd probably be hanging from a bridge. So I came up with a plan. There was a drifter named Carlos who joined around the same time I did. Tijuana kid. Nobody important. No family anyone talked about. He drank too much and talked too little. The kind of guy organizations absorb because disposable men are useful. Carlos trusted me. That's the part that sticks in my throat. I started planting seeds, little comments about him disappearing for hours, quiet suggestions about how he asked too many questions. Then I used agency resources, God forgive me, to manufacture supporting evidence. Anonymous tips, altered intel leaks, a burner phone found in his room with numbers linked to federal contacts. I built the case carefully, and Miguel bought it. I remember the exact moment. We were sitting in a cantina outside Reynosa, flies buzzing around spilled beer. Miguel leaned toward me and said, "I knew something was wrong with that rat." Just like that. Pressure gone. My life purchased with another man's. I told myself it was for the greater good, that maintaining my position inside the cartel would save future lives. Bigger seizures, bigger arrests, long-term strategy. That's the language agencies teach you because it makes ugly decisions easier to swallow. But deep down, I knew the truth. I chose myself. Carlos was taken 3 nights later. The new regional boss wanted to make an example out of him. Younger guy, trying to prove he was real loco, a real sicario, a real monster worthy of promotion. Cartels are corporations, but they're also theaters. Violence is branding. They dragged Carlos into an abandoned auto shop outside the city. I was there with maybe 15 others. That's another thing people misunderstand. If you're undercover long enough, eventually you don't just hear about violence. You stand next to it. You breathe it. Carlos kept insisting he was innocent. Over and over. I swear to God, hermanos, I'm not a Fed. I can still hear his voice cracking when he said, hermanos, brothers. He looked at me once during it all, directly at me. Not accusing, not even suspicious, just terrified. Looking for help from the only person there he trusted, and I didn't do a damn thing. They didn't give him a bullet. He wasn't so lucky. My God, I wish they had. The boss used a box cutter first. Said bullets were too respectful for traitors. The details don't matter. Not really. Pain always sounds the same after a while. What I remember most is the smell. Blood has copper in it. Fear smells sour, almost chemical. And afterward, somebody cooked carne asada behind the garage while Carlos's body was still inside. That's cartel life. Horror and normalcy stitched together so tightly, they become inseparable. I drank myself unconscious that night. The next morning, my DEA handler congratulated me over an encrypted line. Good work maintaining cover. Good work. I stayed undercover another 3 years after that. 3 years of shipments, executions, kidnappings, and pretending I still knew who I was. Eventually, we brought down key figures. Huge operation. Headlines. Politicians shaking hands at podiums. I got medals I never displayed. Retired at 47 with a pension. high blood pressure, and enough classified memories to poison a city reservoir. At the time, I thought I'd compartmentalized everything successfully. That's the trick they teach you. Put the bad memories in a locked room inside your head and keep moving. But retirement ruins compartmentalization. When you're undercover, survival keeps you busy. Constant movement, constant adrenaline. Your brain never has time to stop. Then suddenly you're home every day with silence. And silence is where the dead start talking. The nightmares began about 6 months after retirement. Not every night. At first, maybe once a week, then more. Sometimes I dream I'm back in the garage. Sometimes I'm the one tied to the chair. Sometimes Carlos is standing beside my bed staring at me with that confused expression, like he still can't understand why I didn't help him. The worst dreams are the realistic ones, the quiet ones. In those, I'm sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee when Carlos walks in and sits across from me. No blood, no wounds, just tired eyes. And he asks one question: why me? I never have an answer. When I look up again, he's still there, only now he sits there bearing the full horrors of what the box cutter did to him. Therapists love words like trauma and moral injury. They package guilt into clinical language, like that changes anything. Maybe it helps some people. Doesn't help me, because the truth is simple. Carlos died because I was afraid. Not afraid of death, though that was part of it. I was afraid of failure, afraid of losing the operation, afraid of becoming the cautionary tale whispered around DEA field offices. So I justified it. I told myself, sacrificing one man protected thousands. Maybe statistically that's even true. Maybe the intelligence I provided saved lives later on. I honestly don't know anymore. But morality doesn't balance like accounting books. You don't erase one horror by preventing another. You just carry both. I'm not looking for absolution. Hell, I don't even think I deserve it. There's no priest or therapist or government ceremony that can clean blood off a memory. I just needed someone to hear it before I die. Because after spending 8 years pretending to be someone else, sometimes confession is the closest thing left to becoming human again. "13 years is a long time to wear a badge. Long enough that the weight of it stops feeling heroic and starts feeling ordinary. Long enough that the smell of blood, cheap perfume, stale beer, and fear all become part of the job. Long enough that you stop believing in clean lines between good people and bad people. For most of those 13 years, I worked either homicide or vice. Proper policing, as some of the old-timers called it. Not traffic tickets, not noise complaints. The real dark side of humanity. I have seen what people do when they want money, power, revenge, sex, control, silence. I have seen fathers sell daughters, lovers bury lovers, addicts turn on their own blood for $20, and a warm place to sleep. I have sat across from murderers who cried like children, and victims who stared through me, like they had already left the world. I am not saying that to brag. God knows there is nothing impressive about becoming numb. But with what I have seen people do and the lengths they will go to further their own ends, I thought nothing scared or surprised me anymore. I was wrong once. It happened while I was undercover with Vice. We had been looking into a local businessman named Jean-Claude Baptiste, Haitian-born, rich enough to be respectable, cruel enough to be useful to monsters. On paper, he owned import businesses, a private security firm, a nightclub, and a chain of cash-heavy corner stores. Off paper, we believed he was involved in human trafficking, prostitution, and murder for hire. Women came through his operation and vanished into rooms with no windows. Men who owed him money disappeared. Rivals turned up in rivers, burnt out cars, or not at all. On the street, nobody called him Jean-Claude. They called him the Magic Man. He encouraged it. The first time I met him, he was wearing a black coat despite the August heat, a wide-brimmed black hat, and white makeup that made his face look almost mask-like. There were streaks of red around his mouth and dark paint hollowing his eyes. He carried a polished cane topped with silver. He told people the cane was imbued and heavy with captured souls. Most men like him build their reputation with guns. Jean-Claude built his with theater. Everything around him was dressed up in voodoo language. The girls they moved from city to city like cattle were called sacrifices. The men he used as killers were called zombies. His lieutenants spoke about curses and spirits like accountants discussing invoices. At first, I thought it was just branding. Fear as a business model. I had infiltrated the outfit under the name Ray Marlowe, a washed-up enforcer with gambling debts and flexible morals. It took months to get close. I started on the outside, watching doors, carrying packages, taking beatings I could not give back properly, because my cover mattered more than my pride. Eventually, I got trusted enough to be in rooms where decisions were made. That was where I met Manny. Manny could not have been more than 23. Thin kid, nervous hands, soft voice. The kind of guy who apologized when someone else bumped into him. He had been brought in as a possible zombie, meaning a contract killer. I remember thinking there had been some mistake. Manny looked frightened of his own shadow. He would barely make eye contact. When one of Jean-Claude's men joked about cutting a rival's throat, Manny went pale. Jean-Claude noticed me watching him. He smiled. "You doubt him, Ray." "I doubt he can order lunch without shaking," I said. The room laughed. Jean-Claude did not. He tapped his cane twice against the floor. "Come, I show you how I turn men into monsters." He led Manny and me down a narrow hallway at the back of the club, past the private rooms, past the storage cages, to a door painted black. Everyone called that room the church. Inside, there were no pews, no cross, nothing I would have recognized as holy. The walls were draped in black cloth. Candles burned in red glass jars. The air stank of rum, incense, and something coppery underneath. Manny sat in a wooden chair in the center of the room. I stood near the door, one hand loose at my side, trying to look bored while every instinct I had told me to leave. Jean-Claude removed his hat and placed it on the mantel. Then he took down a small gold box. He opened it with the care of a man handling a newborn. Inside was a relic. That is the only word I have for it. It looked like a tiny human skull, yellowed with age, no bigger than a fist. Through the center of it ran a blade-shaped piece of bone, impaling it from temple to temple. Symbols had been carved into the skull. Some were crosses. Some looked like letters. Some looked like things drawn by someone having a nightmare. Jean-Claude began to mutter. I could not understand the words. They were low and wet and rhythmic. Manny started crying silently, tears sliding down his cheeks without a sound. "Hold it," Jean-Claude said. Manny shook his head. Jean-Claude leaned close. "Hold it!" Manny took the skull in both hands. What happened next is why I am telling you this. Because I know what drugs look like. I know hypnosis is mostly nonsense. I know fear can break a man. I know trauma can empty someone out and leave something colder behind, but I know what I saw. A thin green mist leaked from the skull. It rose like breath in winter, curling from the eye sockets, drifting upward. Then it slid into Manny's eyes. He jerked back hard, his body going rigid. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For a second, his eyes glowed. Not bright, not like a movie, just enough that I saw green reflected where brown should have been. Then something blue came out of him. A pale blue mist poured from Manny's eyes and mouth. It twisted in the air, like smoke being pulled by an invisible current, then sank back into the skull. The room went still. Jean-Claude stopped muttering. Manny lowered his hands. The crying had stopped. The shaking had stopped. Everything human in his face had stopped. He looked up at me, and there was nobody home. Not anger, not fear, not even confusion. Just a flat, dead calm. Jean-Claude smiled and closed the gold box around the skull. "You see," he said. "Now he can work." 2 nights later, Manny killed a man named Luis Mercado in a parking lot behind a pool hall. Walked up, shot him twice in the head, walked away. No panic. No witnesses willing to talk. A week after that, he stabbed a woman who had been skimming from Jean-Claude's escort money. I saw the crime scene photos later. It was neat, almost careful. The third one was a rival pimp called Darius Venn. Manny drowned him in a motel bathtub, then sat on the bed until Jean-Claude's cleaner arrived. I know about those 3. There may have been more. Eventually, the case came down. We hit Jean-Claude's businesses all at once. Federal help, local warrants, tactical teams, the whole circus. We got ledgers, guns, girls out alive, enough evidence to bury half his organization. But we never found the gold box. We never found the skull. Jean-Claude was arrested in the back office of his club. He was not wearing the makeup then. Without it, he looked smaller, older, almost tired. As they cuffed him, he looked across the room at me. He knew. Maybe he had known all along. He smiled and said, "You think the badge protects your soul?" I told myself it was just another threat from another cornered predator. I still tell myself that. Manny was found 3 days later under an overpass, alive, but empty. He did not resist arrest. He did not speak during questioning. He did not react when they showed him photographs of the people he had killed. A court psychiatrist called it dissociation. Another called it extreme coercive conditioning. The prosecution called him a murderer. The defense called him a victim. Me? I think something was taken out of him in that room. I think something else was put in. I have spent 13 years looking at the worst humanity has to offer. I know men invent monsters because it is easier than admitting monsters are just men. But sometimes, late at night, I remember that green mist. I remember Manny's blue breath vanishing into that little skull. I remember the way his face went blank, like a light switched off behind his eyes. And I wonder what Jean-Claude really had in that box. A trick? A drug? A piece of old bone in theater strong enough to break a frightened kid? Maybe. That is the answer I prefer, because the alternative is that the magic man did exactly what he promised. He turned a man into a monster. And somewhere out there, that relic is still waiting for the next pair of shaking hands to hold it. I've always had respect for cops, not the movie version. not the sunglasses and slow-motion walks. I mean the real men and women wearing a badge in every city, town, and county in America. The ones climbing into patrol cars at 6 in the morning after 3 hours of sleep because somebody has to answer the radio when it screams. The ones standing between ordinary people and the worst moments of their lives. People talk about law and order like it's some giant machine that runs by itself. It isn't. It's held together by people. People who miss birthdays, people who work holidays, people who walk into houses, alleys, and traffic. Stops not knowing whether they'll walk back out. I loved cops before I became one. Hell, I wanted to be a detective before I even knew what detectives actually did. As a kid, I'd sit on the living room floor, watching crime shows with my father, asking 1,000 questions. Who figured it out? How did they know he was lying? Why did detectives always seem like they knew something everyone else didn't? My father used to laugh and tell me, "Kid, if you become a detective, you'll spend more time with paperwork than bad guys." Didn't matter. I wanted it. I joined the academy at 19. 19 years old and convinced I knew everything. The academy beat that out of me pretty quickly. Then came uniform patrol. 4 years. 4 years of domestics, drunks, burglaries, overdoses, car accidents, and death notifications. 4 years of learning that real police work wasn't hero music and dramatic speeches. Mostly it was patience. Mostly it was paperwork. Mostly it was trying to help people who didn't want help. Then an opportunity came up. Narcotics needed someone younger, someone who could disappear. Deep cover. A local gang operation with suspected connections stretching up and down the East Coast. I remember sitting in that briefing room. My lieutenant slid a folder across the table. "You interested?" "Interested." I thought I'd won the lottery. Training lasted months. New identity, new habits, new speech patterns, new history. I learned how to lie with a straight face. How to remember lies. How to build lies on top of lies. Then came the day they handed me my detective shield. Gold. I remember holding it in my hand and feeling like I'd grabbed onto the thing I'd been chasing my whole life. Proudest day I ever had. I thought I was becoming somebody. I had no idea I was about to become nobody. Undercover work destroys you in ways people don't understand. Movies get it wrong. It's not shootouts and hidden microphones. It's isolation. You don't have friends. You don't have family. You don't tell people where you are. You don't tell people what you're doing. You become a ghost wearing another man's skin. The lies never stop. You wake up lying. You eat lying. You sleep lying. Eventually you catch yourself wondering which version is actually you. Still, the first few months went perfectly. Better than perfectly. I got inside, got trusted, got names, money routes, safe houses, weapons, drug shipments moving from Florida through the Carolinas all the way north. By month 3, I had enough evidence to bury leadership forever. I thought I'd done it. I walked into my boss's office feeling 10 feet tall. Then the suits arrived. 2 men, expensive shoes, expensive watches, expensive confidence. They walked in like they owned the building. One dropped a folder onto the desk. Presidential insignia stamped on the front. My lieutenant read it, then read it again. The room got quiet. I remember asking, "What is this?" Nobody answered at first. Then one of the suits said, "The operation continues." Operation. Not investigation. Operation. Turns out our gang wasn't just a gang. They worked under a larger cartel network. And somewhere, at some level way above my pay grade, somebody had decided those people were useful, or less dangerous, or strategically necessary. Pick whichever phrase helps you sleep. Arrests were prohibited. No disruption. No action. Stay undercover. Build intelligence. Wait for federal direction. I remember staring at my lieutenant. He wouldn't look me in the eye. I wanted to scream. Months risking my life. Months pretending. Months earning evidence. Gone. Just gone. I went back under. Back to violence. Back to danger. Back to bodies. Back to hearing gunshots and pretending my heart wasn't trying to climb out of my throat. Then something else started getting to me. Money. Obscene amounts of money. Street guys made thousands a day. Thousands. Guys barely old enough to drink flashing more cash than surgeons. Leadership pulled numbers that didn't even sound real. Millions. I started doing math in my head. Average detective salary? Maybe 50 to 90 grand. A good month for street guys. An afternoon for bosses. I hated myself for noticing. I hated myself even more for continuing to think about it. Because I knew I shouldn't care. But once an idea gets into your head, it grows. If the people above me could decide who mattered and who didn't, if lines could move, if bad people became protected people, then what exactly was I risking my life for? I didn't wake up one day and decide to become one of them. It wasn't that dramatic. It happened slowly. Tiny steps, little compromises. A favor here, information there. Helping one crew over another. Using what I knew. Telling myself it was temporary. Telling myself it helped maintain cover. Telling myself lots of things. Then one day I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. I had rank, authority. People listened when I talked. People moved when I gave orders. I looked in the mirror and saw expensive clothes and expensive watches. I looked at my old detective shield sitting in a drawer and felt nothing. That scared me, because it should have hurt. About a week ago, they brought in a new guy, young, quiet, helping with street operations in the projects. First thing I noticed, haircut. Second, shoes. Third, eyes. Always watching. Always calculating. Never using enough words. I knew immediately, because I'd spent years becoming one. Undercover. No question. I started seeing signs everywhere. How he held himself. How he scanned exits. How he listened instead of talked. He was me. Or who I used to be. Now I sit across from him some nights playing cards and wondering if he knows. Wondering if he looks at me and sees himself years from now. Wondering if I should say something. Pull him aside. Tell him to get out. Tell him none of this is worth it. Try to rebuild a case. Try to remember who I was. Or maybe I stay quiet. Maybe I keep pretending. Maybe I keep walking. Maybe there isn't enough of the old me left to save. People think becoming bad happens like flipping a switch. I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's erosion. Tiny pieces, one at a time, until eventually you look back and can't find where the shoreline used to be. I still keep the gold shield. Still carry it, not in my pocket, not where anyone would find it. I keep it hidden. Sometimes I take it out and stare at it. I remember being 19. Remember believing things were simple. Good guys, bad guys, justice, truth. I miss that kid, because now, sitting here in a room full of armed men counting stacks of money, I honestly don't know anymore. Maybe right and wrong exist. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're real. Maybe they're stories we tell ourselves so we can sleep. I don't know. What I do know is this. The new guy looked at me today, just for a second. And I swear to God, I think he recognized me too.